Hi everyone, and welcome to Diverse Dividends. I'm your host, Sara Loriot. My guest for today's episode exemplifies the incredible leadership required to break barriers in one of our country's most important sectors. I'm excited to introduce to you a highly accomplished leader with a remarkable career in finance and technology, Katy Boshart, President and CEO at Manulife Bank Canada. Katy's career is defined by her ability to transform businesses and drive innovation, but her journey is anything but traditional. In fact, she initially planned to go to medical school, but instead she pivoted to financial services and started her career at MBNA. Given her tremendous success, this may have just been the right call. Since then, she's held significant leadership roles at Chase Bank and TD Bank, where she led teams across technology, digital platforms, credit cards, and branch banking. Her experience includes leading pricing optimization strategies for a $140 billion portfolio at Chase Bank and scaling agile technology and business teams at TD Bank, supporting all customer engagement assets for the enterprise. Wow. It's very impressive. But Katy is more than just a business leader. As she says herself, and as you'll hear in this episode, every role shapes who she is as a leader. So she's a musician, she's a daughter, she's a mother, she's a colleague, a friend, a sister, and all of these pieces come together to inform her leadership style. So as a leader, she understands the importance of energy, thought leadership, and professional leadership. She's known for creating high-performing team cultures that attract and develop talent. And beyond her accomplishments, Katy is a self-described maximizer. So in this episode, we expand on what that means, but here's a teaser. A maximizer is someone who excels at turning challenges into opportunities and who is driven to leave teams and businesses better than they found them. And she believes that every one of us has an opportunity to be a leader every day. She's committed to authenticity and rejects the notion of fitting into a traditional mold in order to be successful. And I must say, that part really resonates with me. So make sure you watch the full interview today. In this episode, Katy will share her insights on how her diverse roles have shaped her as a leader and how she balances her priorities. With that, let's dive in. Katy, as my first question for you, I would like to start with how you got to where you are, because I can only assume that becoming a bank CEO doesn't just happen. So I'm curious to know about your professional journey, but also whether becoming a bank CEO was always something that you envisioned for yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting because my passion is really around maximizing potential in every opportunity that I see. And I think my career has been defined by curiosity and chasing experiences. In fact, I started with a biology degree, and then I found myself unexpectedly in a banking career. But I seized that opportunity to find my passion, to go after experiences that were interesting to me. And I love solving problems. And so I think the collection of those things have really helped me chart the course of my career, even though I didn't start off with a long-term aspiration to be a bank CEO.
Wow, that's so interesting, biology. Can you tell us more about it? Did you end up working in that field at all?
I didn't actually. No, I have a biology and history degree. And after I graduated university, I was looking into biomedical marketing or pharmaceuticals. And at the time that I graduated, there was a recession on. And so I wasn't able to find a job in that field. And as many of you may have had to do as well, I kind of went home to my parents to try and figure out what was next. And that's how I ended up in banking.
Oh, that's so interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just being open to new opportunities.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think that's a good segue to my second question, which has to do with the concept of following a defined career path, which perhaps you had thinking that you'd be working in biology versus just being open to unexpected opportunities. Can you speak to that concept?
I think that as a leader, it's really important to be open to new possibilities and new opportunities. And over the course of your career, you're going to have experiences that you plan for and those that you didn't plan for. Mm-hmm. But I view myself as a maximizer. And so what that means is I take every opportunity to either face that challenge head on and figure out what I can make out of it, or make it into a stepping stone to something more. And I think that has defined my career, but is also kind of a nice roadmap for others to think about. How do you go out and look for the experiences that you needed as a leader that are going to make you a better leader long term?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because being a leader is not necessarily being in a management position. So for instance, at work, I don't have any direct reports, but I still consider myself to be a leader because, through my involvement at CFA Society Toronto, for example, taking new initiatives, or just remaining open to new opportunities. And and I can say that I can relate to some of the things that you just mentioned. I've been in asset management for 10 years. I definitely found a passion for asset management, but I wouldn't have landed in my current seat if it wasn't for just seeing what was out there, because I started in financial services when I was 18, working for a credit union, and then going to work for a bank.
And the thing I found about banking, one of the things I love about banking is the variety. There are so many different experiences that you could have that, starting right out of school, you don't necessarily know what's out there or what's available. And then I'd even argue for today's generation, the roles that are going to be the most senior leadership roles for you later in your career didn't even exist yesterday. And so it's going to change quite a bit over time. And I think as a leader, I like to cultivate that idea of, it's not about a title. It's not about how many people you have reporting to you. It's more about what is the energy that you bring to your teams that you work with. How do you provide thought leadership or professional leadership to your peers, to those that you interact with, and being really impactful with the group of people that you have opportunity to work with. And so if you can think about it in that mindset, every one of us has an opportunity to be a leader every day.
I love that. Thank you so much, Katy. That's actually a fantastic segue to my next question, which is on your leadership style. So could you please describe your leadership style and how it's evolved throughout your career?
My leadership style is really grounded in being an authentic leader, with an energy and passion for people and a drive to maximize results.
I like it. Yeah, I like the idea of the working with people aspect, but in particular, I love the idea of being authentic, because that's something that I abide by myself. And I guess on that note, a bit of a story for our listeners. I emailed you last week to prepare for this interview, but you were out of office, and then your out of office message said something along the lines of, "I'm out of office, enjoying time with my family." And it really had an impact on me, so much so that I actually forwarded your out of office yes, to my teammates, because I said, you know what, this is the first time that I receive an out of office message that says I'm enjoying time with my family, right? And it just speaks to who you are as a human, things that you care about. And, right now, my family is my priority. Right. And I just love that. And that's something that I may borrow.
Absolutely. I think everyone doesn't necessarily need permission, but should have permission to be your whole self. And there are times in your life when you need to focus on your family and times that you're focused on your career. But what makes me a great leader is the ability to do both and prioritize accordingly.
I absolutely adore that. So speaking of leadership, you are the leader of Manulife Bank Canada. And in your role, correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that you are responsible for the strategic direction of the bank as well as for its culture. So could you please tell us about your ambitions for the future of Manulife Bank Canada and whether there are any areas that you're excited about?
Manulife Bank has an incredible opportunity in front of us to become the lead partner for financial advisors in banking. And my vision is that we can maximize that opportunity by partnering with financial advisors at the intersection of wealth and insurance. I think that for me, it's not so much about just competing in market, but creating a new paradigm. How do we create a modern advisor-centric bank that enables financial advisors to really grow their practices? And if we view ourselves as that trusted partner, we can actually take a space that's not really focused on in the market today.
Mm-hmm. I love how you're using the word maximizer.
It's a high descriptor for myself, I think.
No, I love it. I had never heard it before. And I guess going back to who you are as a leader, have you always been a maximizer, would you say?
Yeah, I think it's part of my personality. It's part of the strengths that I bring. And I think that, as you grow as a leader, you start to learn more about yourself. And I'm a big fan of playing to your strengths. Everybody would have heard of Strengths Finder or strengths-based leadership.
Yes.
I think the more that you understand your strengths and study your team's strengths, the more you can create the magic of having a really high-performing team where everybody brings something different to the table. And that's the power for me of maximizing. So taking an opportunity that's in front of you, often opportunities show up in the form of problems, but you can learn the most during those challenges. And if you can find the way to make things better, I love saying, my philosophy is to find ways to leave teams better than I found them, leave businesses better than I found them, leave the world better than I found it. That's, to me, what really encompasses being a maximizer at heart.
I love it. Thank you so much for expanding on that. And I love how you said that it's all about also playing on your strengths. And I definitely relate to it because I think that in my 10 years in asset management, I've always remained true to myself. But as the world evolved, I would say that it wasn't always something that my employer liked about me, right? Like at times, I was told, oh, maybe you're a bit too bold or a bit too bubbly, until I realized that this is who I am. And, how can I take what I consider to be strengths and apply them to work, right? Just to do something good with it and really find my niche.
When I was starting out my career, gosh, it's been 31 years now since I started, but starting out in my career, I really felt that there was a very traditional mold that I had to fit in order to be successful as a woman in finance. And I've decided to reject that notion. And I think we're in a world today where that authenticity or that ability to be who you are is more valuable to driving results, driving benefits, ultimately to the bottom line when you're in business. But I love that sense of being true to yourself and who you are. Don't let anyone else tell you that you can't be your true self. I think that's really powerful. So I encourage you to hold on to that.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I do think it's one of my strengths. And actually, I think that part of my personality translates quite well into what I do for work. And it's only because I allowed myself to really explore that side of me.
And even knowing yourself, I think, is a particular strength, because the more time you spend kind of introspectively understanding who you are and what drives you, what strengths you uniquely bring to the table, the more you can find ways to draw that out of other people when you're working in a team.
Oh, I fully agree. I fully agree. It's almost giving permission
to
others. And I guess going back to your out of office email saying, I'm enjoying time with my family. It's maybe the feeling that it had on me is that, yes, I have permission
to
take time off of work to enjoy time with my family.
And ultimately, it just makes me better when I come back, right? And everyone has different ways that they recharge. And so we should all have enough permission to recharge in the ways that are most meaningful for ourselves so that you can come back and bring your best self to work every single day.
And be more efficient and more productive,
That's
right? Everybody wins.
That's right, yeah.
So Katy, you are one of 2 women bank CEOs in Canada for domestic banks. So I think it's fair to say that you are a trailblazer in many respects. So was there a moment in your career you realized you had to become a role model for others, for myself included?
That's an interesting question. I'll share with you that I went to Wellesley College in Massachusetts, which is a women's college. And so this notion of being a role model is not a novel concept to me, but I don't think I really focused on it. For me, the the challenges and opportunities to drive material growth in a business line, that's what excites me. And so, as a leader, I would be more focused on that business problem that I was solving or that team that I was building than necessarily thinking about my own career in the context of being a role model for others. But I'd say about halfway into my career, I started realizing that as I got more influence, whether it was the people that would report into me or the number of teams that I would impact on a daily basis, that there was a responsibility I had to be a role model, to show women that there are paths for us, particularly when you think about the stats that are out there about the number of female CEOs globally that are out there. And even women in senior leadership. We've had a lot of conversations about what does it take to provide women the kind of physical role model of, yes, I can do that. I can be a mom, be a parent, be a daughter, be a sister, be a friend, and I still can be a businesswoman, right? Those things are all possible. And so I try and live up to it as much as I can every day.
No, I love that. So it's almost as though being a role model and a trailblazer is, simply said, just a function of who you are. So who you are led to you being a role model.
It's definitely not something I focus on. I think that would be very difficult to operate every day thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm a role model. Meanwhile, I'm trying to figure out how to help my teenager get her assignments turned in on time, right?
Going back to grade 9 mathematics.
That's right. That's right.
Do I remember? Yeah. But just like being a bank CEO, it's who you are, your personality traits, your strengths, your work in general made you a perfect fit for that role as well.
Well, I hope so. I think the role model is a bit of the outcome of landing a role like this, right?
Yes. Oh, the outcome. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, that's wonderful.
This episode of Diverse Dividends is brought to you by CFA Society Toronto's 4th Annual Women in Finance Conference. The event is taking place on February 27, 2025 at the Arcadian Loft. To learn more about the conference, visit cfatoronto.ca.
CFA Society Toronto is hosting a Women in Finance conference on February 27, 2025, where Katy will be our keynote speaker. Katy, thank you again so much for agreeing to be part of the event.
I'm honored you asked me. Thank you.
Oh, of course. I mean, I'm beyond excited about the conversation ahead. So the theme of the event is all about embracing women's diverse identities, because as we mentioned, we are all more than our jobs. Yes, we have this role that we have at work. It can also be part of our identity, but we're all multifaceted. And outside of work, we all have passions or other things that we identify with. And so, Katy, if that's okay with you, I'd like to dive into that notion just a little bit.
Sure, let's do it.
Wonderful. So could you please share insights about the various roles that you juggle and how they contribute to your perspective as a leader?
Every role that I have shapes who I am as a leader. I'm a musician. I'm a daughter. I'm a parent. I'm a sister. I'm a friend. I'm a colleague. And of course, I'm a CEO. And I think that I bring pieces of me from each of those roles into everything that I do.
That's so interesting. And, thinking about this question, I had to do the exercise for myself as well. And what do I identify with? Who am I? What role do I occupy? And it's a bit of a philosophical exercise if you really dive into it. And yeah, so at work I have this job, but at home now I'm a new mom, so I'm a mom, of course. But to my daughter, I'd say I'm probably her private chef.
That's right.
And we're both working parents, and my husband is her personal stylist. I take care of our finances, so I'm the treasurer.
Yeah.
I'm from Montreal.
Many different hats.
Many different hats. And yeah, so really thinking about that. And it's important to really hone in on those various roles and how they contribute to your whole person. as well.
I also love the parallel for those of us who are parents. I find that so much of what I've learned as a parent has helped me as a coach at work. So how do I find ways to encourage my children's independence and self-sufficiency? And that translates into, as a leader, how do I help my people become better at what they do and more self-sufficient on their own so that they can run the business without me? I think that there's a lot of parallels there, and it's just fascinating when you think about the different ways that we show up as whole people in our lives.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I love that perspective that you brought in, because I almost always thought about it the other way around, where when I walk into the office, well, I don't stop being a mom, right? Like if there's something going on with my daughter, so that is now ingrained in me, but I never really thought about it the other way around. And maybe digging a bit further into that notion, it's almost as though, if you bear with me for a second, you know how sometimes we say some people wear a mask, right? And some people might go into the office and say, well, I occupy this specific role or this specific position, therefore I need to be all in, I'll wear a mask. And this is who I am for the day. And I think it's really unraveling that notion of having to wear a mask and instead wear a hat, wear many different hats.
Yes.
Using analogies.
I think it's hard to be effective if you're wearing a mask all day.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, think about if you actually had to wear a mask, like a costume. How restricting would that feel?
Yes.
Right? To have to feel like you're sitting in a costume all day. And the other notion that I think is really fascinating is the difference in your own personal confidence about your different roles. And depending on who you are and how confident you are, you may feel super confident at work in terms of your role in finance and knowing how to be successful and knowing what to do. But I imagine you've had that experience of being a new mom and thinking, how the heck don't I know what I'm supposed to be doing with this new little child that I brought into the world, right? And it can really humble you. And just like some people have the opposite approach, they feel very, very confident at home. And then in work, they're not sure how to be effective as a leader or not sure how to win in that space. And so each of us will go through kind of different learning cycles over the course of our lives and our career around where our confidence is. But I think that's normal. I think that's natural, and that's who we are as people.
No, I just love that. In fact, we could talk about that for quite some time. Actually, one thing I want to know about is you being a musician. Can you just spend a few moments telling us about that? Because I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, I spent most of my childhood as a musician. I studied classical and jazz piano, and then I played in bands. And my professors of music were very disappointed when I went to university and didn't study music. And then I veered off into biology, and then I veered off again into banking. So I find there's so many interesting things that I take away from being a musician, whether it's the discipline to have to keep trying again. Being a classical musician is about getting things perfect. Right? There is a way. In classical music, there's a technique, there's a precision around classical music. And then the other side of my personality is as a jazz musician, where it's a lot more free. You have to do improvisation. You have to kind of go in the moment and hear where the rest of the music is taking you. And the notes aren't written in advance. And so I love being able to flex both sides of that. And then I can translate that into my whole personality or my life as a bank CEO. There are times when things need to be very precise and specific, but more and more I'm finding that ability to be flexible and adaptable is more critical today than it ever has been.
This is so eye-opening, and I absolutely mean every part of it. This is eye-opening.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Yes. We didn't expect it to go there. But
No, this is absolutely wonderful. So do you feel that these roles are always part of you? So as we just discussed, you being a musician, so I have a guess as to what the answer will be. So do you feel that these roles are always part of you, even when you're at work, or do you sometimes find yourself having to compartmentalize certain aspects of your life to focus on different responsibilities?
I think the answer is yes to both. I don't think it's an either or. I think each role that you play is innately a part of you.
Mm-hmm.
But I like to live by the philosophy of being present in the moment. I'm not always great at that, but that's my philosophy of how do I become my best self in the moment of the role that I'm operating at that time. And so there are things that we'll talk about. I'm sure we'll talk about it in February more. But how do you create those boundaries for yourself that allows you to compartmentalize to a certain extent, and focus on the business problem at hand? Or likewise, when I'm off enjoying time with my family, I'm not focused on work. In fact, I went a few days without even checking my phone.
Whoa.
And so like there's a mind-boggling, right? So I think that it's really important to figure out how to show up fully where you are and create the support system to the extent that you can to enable you to do that most effectively.
Love it. Love it. So as my last question for you, it's on work-life balance. So whether that's something that you agree with or not, it's a term that we've probably all heard of. So can you tell us your thoughts on the notion of work-life balance as your bank CEO, and how do you manage the demand of this role of being a bank CEO alongside personal commitments?
The balance question. Balance is highly subjective, and I think that it's more about equilibrium. How do you find the way to operate between your professional and your personal life in a way that works for you, that doesn't allow them to bleed into each other, too much. I think anybody that has a job running a company doesn't expect to clock in 9 to 5. I don't have a role that allows me to do that. But at the same time, there's only 24 hours in the day. I have the same 24 hours that you have. And so I have to figure out how to balance my priorities at any given moment. And I think for me, kind of going back to the maximizer side of my personality, being really planful about how I'm going to spend my time and what my priority is for a day, week, month, quarter, year. I think those are really important skills that I've learned over time for both my home life and my professional life.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So in summary, key takeaways for me, in terms of what I learned from you, in terms of who you are, you're a maximizer,
Yes.
as you've mentioned. Absolutely love that term. You're authentic, you're true to yourself, you're curious, and you value working with others. And I think that's so wonderful. Thank you again so much, Katy. But the interview is not quite finished. So at Diverse Dividends, we have a tradition where we ask each of our guests the same 3 questions. So those questions, I like to call them dividend questions. They can also be called rapid fire questions. But essentially, our listeners who are tuning in are listening to this interview because they're hoping to reap dividends from our conversation, which I'm sure they did. But this is kind of the last extra
little piece.
But yeah,
piece at the end.
Yeah. So I might put you on the spot a little bit and ask you those dividend questions.
Okay,
does that work
good.
with you?
Yeah.
Okay. Number 1, what do you love about what you do?
First and foremost, I love the people. There's nothing that gives me more satisfaction than finding ways to help people I work with step into their potential.
Love it. Number 2, is there something in the last few years that you have changed your mind on?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, I used to think very linearly about both my career and how you solve problems. If you do X, you get Y. If you invest in X, you will get Y. And I think the current explosion of technology and change in not just the financial industry, but industry as a whole, has really impacted my belief or cemented my belief that thinking more agilely is a critical skill set. If we're going to maximize our opportunities in business, we have to be able to adapt. We have to be able to think more creatively about how we're going to harness whatever opportunity is out there. And the world is changing at such a fast clip that linear thinking isn't sufficient anymore.
Very interesting. And number 3, do you have a piece of advice for our listeners who are looking to advance in their careers?
Hands down, I'd say chase experience, not titles.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, Katy, and thank you for everyone for tuning in, and that's a wrap.
This episode of Diverse Dividends is brought to you by CFA Society Toronto's 4th Annual Women in Finance Conference. The event is taking place on February 27, 2025 at the Arcadian Loft. To learn more about the conference, visit cfatoronto.ca.